And we're live. Hello and welcome to the end of season 1904 Club podcast. And Hull City are safe. Oh, we never thought it was going to happen. Kathryn, Prutts and Fletch are with me. Kathryn, we're going to start with you because you were in that bouncing away end on Saturday at Fratton Park. Put us there, Kathryn, at full time. What was it like?
I was out of breath, tired. I don't think I'd jumped around quite as much for a long time. Hugging strangers, people I didn't know. It was great. It was a really good atmosphere from start to finish. Maybe a 15-minute nervy period after Portsmouth scored, where we sort of realised we only needed a point because of the Luton score, and we were just hoping they could hold on. And actually, a Hull City fan called Joe behind me at half time said Hull had only hadn't conceded two goals in a game since Burnley. So he said to me at half time, we're going to be all right, because if we do concede, that's fine. We only ever concede one goal. And I just kind of thought, God, if we now concede two, I'm going to turn around and blame you. But he was right. And it was horrible. It was torturous, that second half, but it was also like brilliant as well. It was just great to kind of have that atmosphere after what had been a pretty rubbish season, to kind of have that moment of relief with a packed out away end. And to be fair, the Portsmouth fans were brilliant as well, kind of applauding us staying up, which felt a little bit kind of like they were going, "Oh, bless you, like, well done, you've stayed up. We stayed up 2 weeks ago." But that was nice. It was just a really nice afternoon after the sort of torture of, the game itself.
That's what it was like in the press box. I was sat with the city media guys, and we sort of, when he put 8 minutes up, we were just shouting. If you were listening to Tigers Plus, I apologise, because you would have just heard me shouting, "Sit on the ball, goalkeeper, put it out of play." And but to be fair, when it was at full time, we sort of like, there was a massive exhale of relief, and we all had hugs. It was really nice. And then loads of Portsmouth fans that were sat right in front of the press box were all middle aged, of about 50, female, all turned around and were like, "Oh, we're really pleased for you." They gave us some sweets. That was nice. Prutts, you were obviously covering it for Sky. What was that whole final day like? Obviously, you've got Luton being trounced at West Brom. You've got Stoke and Derby kind of sitting on the ball and doing nothing for 90 minutes. And then there was the drama of City going in front at Fratton Park and taking control of the whole situation. Preston going in front twice at Ashton Gate and being pegged back. Give us an insight of what it was like from your point of view, trying to kind of orchestrate the whole day.
Well, it's great fun because you obviously getting it all sat there. We sit behind the Borough dugout, and as the news was coming in, and all different ends of the spectrum as well, wasn't there? When you looked at, say, like the Leeds United score and Burnley looking like they were going to be champions, and then what transpired. The one that really surprised me, and one that now with hindsight you can kind of say, because City are safe, is I'm very surprised with the Luton score and performance. They, from the sounds of it and what I saw, just completely fell apart, didn't they? And that was my main worry for City going into the final day, because obviously it was like, well, if City win, then you look. I was thinking Luton going there would have been fairly straightforward, to be honest, given that West Brom had nothing really to play for. And then, like you say, the rest of the permutations, who would have thought Preston would have gone 2-0 up against Bristol City? It was fascinating, really. And when you looked at, it's all the cliches of when you watch it and the table as it stands comes up, and I'm party obviously to everything in my ear back at base when they're telling such and such a scored, that's gone in, this is that, and then you heard that City had scored and saw Crooks' goal, and just they from obviously watching the game in front of us and trying to keep abreast of what was going around, there seemed to be a real urgency about the way City started the game and went about the game. Louis had a great chance that was saved well, wasn't it? And I think that I find days like that, they're just a joy to do. They're a pleasure and a privilege to do. I've been involved when you are in the proverbial, and it's very, very high intensity. Stress, you can say stressful, I think, because it is relative, and it's your profession, it's your job, so you can find bits of it stressful. And then knowing that you can sit and kind of take it all in. First, as a broadcaster, in inverted commas, because that makes you sound like a whopper using that term. But as a fan as well, And it's obviously a slightly different part of the conversation, but Coventry City and Borough didn't seem to have the answers to quite big questions, because obviously they had to do their bit and make sure that other teams around dropped points and messed up. But the atmosphere at Coventry was absolutely amazing. A record attendance, I think, at the CBS, and it was just phenomenal to be part of. Theirs is a different type of joy, isn't it? It's joy to a certain degree, but then it's a step forward, and the bigger steps are to come. But listening in and kind of remembering watching football as a fan, playing football from a privileged point of view as a professional, and then almost preempting what we talked about last week about what City needed to do and what their season needed to be, of just glorious scenes of the sunshine, final day of the season, tops off, everyone clapping the fans. And it's bizarre because it came to fruition, didn't it? And a cynic could say, by hook or by crook, they got there. Yes, they took care of their business by virtue of the fact that they didn't lose. They didn't go there and turn them over 3-0, but then City were never going to do that because of stuff they found doing that to anyone this season. So I think you have to take utter joy and relief from the fans, as Kathryn was saying, hugging strangers and what it means to them, because it would have been relatively catastrophic City falling through that particular door, because I wouldn't have seen a City side come bouncing straight back up. But that's all hypothetical now, because they've clung on, and there's a lot of work to do. But right now, it should be enjoyed, really should be enjoyed and celebrated. Cynics will tell you, celebrating staying up, yeah. It's a 46-game season, it's tough. So, yeah, we are going to celebrate staying up because the fans deserve it.
And Fletch, that was the thing, wasn't it? We talked. Obviously, I know you were in the basement last week, so you weren't around. But that was the key thing for City, was to go there and be really positive. And that first half, they were really positive. And I guess we said this at the time, it was almost a microcosm of the season, the whole game at Portsmouth, that they scored a goal. They had chances to extend that lead and go 2 and 3-0 up. Didn't take them. Started the second half really badly. Although before Portsmouth did score, Joe Gow with a brilliant amazing run, his second of the game, should have scored. It fell to Pedro, and as Matt Crooks beautifully put it, Joffrey's massive arse got in the way, and that would have been 2-0 before Portsmouth scored. So inevitably it got nervy at the end, but ultimately, however they've done it, whether they've survived by winning the game or survived as it was in the end on goal difference, they've survived, and that is the crucial thing, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is. Absolutely. I'm going to park my negative side for now and just say, like, you didn't really need to come to this, did it? But they've got there, they've done it, and I'm so relieved, if anything. I mean, the word I used on the day itself was phew, because I was terrified of what perils would have been, unleashed on the club if they'd gone down into League One. So I'm absolutely thrilled to bits that they've stayed in the division. They've done it in a manner which I don't think any supporter would have wanted them to. They almost sleepwalked into being relegated, and they've managed to get out of it with that one roll of the dice. But yeah, it epitomised the season. I'm looking at some of the numbers for this season, and I don't even know how a football club can achieve such a feat. But against the top 8, they took 18 points. Against the bottom 8, they took 17 points. So I don't even know how that's actually plausible, to be honest. That's maybe something we discuss later on, but overall I'm delighted that they've stayed up. But there's mood music kicking about the football club again, isn't there, Baz, at the end of the season? It's not straightforward, we can all go on holiday. There seems to be things bubbling away in the background which don't suggest stability.
I was saying this yesterday, at most football clubs, you kind of get to the end of the season and the season's finished. The bank holiday Monday after the season finishes is kind of relatively quiet. Some players have gone away already. Everybody's sort of taking stock, and nothing really happens on bank holiday. At Hull City, you've got the skipper topless parading around the city's ale houses, which makes national news, and then you've got speculation about the manager. So please, you're craving just a quiet day in the existence of this football club, but alas, it's not to be. I joke about the Coyle situation. We've got to be careful because the police were involved with things and whatnot. But that was obviously not a great situation for the club to be in, irrespective of whose fault it is or what happened. That's not that's not an ideal situation anyway, but hopefully that gets resolved and it's dealt with. As I say, the police are involved. And yeah, Ruben Selles, his position is is under review, shall we say. Kathryn, thoughts on, obviously we've spoken a lot about Ruben. We know, and there have been people that stood up in the MKM Stadium and blamed me for his appointment. We championed him on the podcast months and months ago. Would you stick or twist at this stage, given the fact that, it's worth remembering he inherited a team devoid of confidence, bottom of the table, couldn't score for toffee, injuries, and God knows what else. It's not all been plain sailing. Yes, he's made mistakes, but ultimately, however it's happened, his remit when he came in mid-December was to keep Hull City in the Championship. And at the end of the season, he's kept Hull City in the Championship. What's your kind of assessment, Kathryn, on Ruben, and what would you do if you were the owner?
I think we're all just craving a little bit of stability, aren't we? In terms of, we've brought a manager in. Yes, it's been up and down. It's not been perfect, but there have been some really encouraging signs there, some potential, some really good performances, and ultimately, he kept the team in the division. To be fair to him, he played it perfectly on Saturday. He knew he only needed a point. He said in his interview after the game, we didn't need to go and chase a win and leave ourselves vulnerable to conceding because a point was going to do us. He went really, really defensive. And when he took Pedro off and brought Alfie Jones on, I was kind of thinking, if we do concede, you're going to look a bit silly. But at the end of the day, they didn't. They managed to hold on for the point. I wouldn't understand getting rid of him if you're going to bring in another kind of young up-and-coming manager or somebody who's maybe not got Championship experience, because that's what you've got at the minute. You've got essentially a young up-and-coming manager that's at least had now about 6 months at the football club, who knows, the players in the building, who can probably attract some more players coming in. So there's absolutely no point getting rid of him if you're going to bring in somebody else that hasn't got Championship experience and is just kind of like you're hoping on, you're basing a decision on their potential or whatever. The only way I could understand it would still frustrate me, but the only way I could understand it is if they bring somebody in that is really, really experienced in the Championship and that can come in and sort of hit the ground running, and somebody that's got that kind of stature in the game that can attract players from other clubs. And that's the only way I would kind of say, okay, at least there's thinking behind it. And also, if it's maybe not Adjan making the decision, if it's someone else making the decision, I'd feel a bit more confident in it just because of Adjan's track record and appointing managers. As much as I kind of say that, I would really like, Ruben to stay, because I think he's started to build something, and you rip it up and start again, there's no guarantee that it's going to work. We saw that last summer, and I do think the players were playing for him on Saturday. I think, they were there celebrating with him at the end. They were pushing him forward to get the appreciation from the fans. So you do take a big risk if you then bring in somebody else that it doesn't work again. We saw that last summer when they brought Tim Bolter in. So if they are going to get rid of him, I just hope they go for somebody that's at least got, Championship experience in them.
I think that when you look at it now, the jeopardy that comes towards the end of the season when you think potentially they're going to chop and change again now has been boxed off, isn't it? You get a Hull City team that's in the Championship that the season before the one just finished were knocking around in the top third of it for quite a long time. And I just think what sets the rumours going as well is if you look at potentials for managers that are out of work at this moment in time. And I mean, Tony Mowbray is obviously one that gets chucked around. Rob Edwards, you look at what he managed to do with a football club that stature-wise is slightly different to City. And I mean that with respect to both of those particular football clubs. Please chuck other names, and not that we're trying to chuck out names just to try and cause any gossip or anything, but that's where they'll be looking at it now, won't they? Because Hull City in League One with potential financial constraints would have been one that a few people would have gone, I don't know, but Hull City in the Championship with a chance potentially to build on the good things that we've seen broadly over the last 6 months. I still think the quality of the squad needs upgrading. Whether there's money for that, we'll soon see. But it's now obviously, and it's a very obvious thing to say, it's a much healthier proposition for a manager, the like that Kathryn's talking about, with a bit of experience and a bit of clout behind them to come stepping forward into the club to take it on again.
Fletch, Prutts mentioned Tony Mowbray. He's a manager that everybody loves, but obviously he's had a great career. His spell at West Brom wasn't great, was it? And he was given the bullet from West Brom. If a change is made, you've got names like Dean Smith, who's currently out, obviously ex Aston Villa, got them promoted to the Premier League. Currently working out in Charlotte. Gary O'Neill would be a phenomenal appointment if they could tempt Gary O'Neill.
Steve Gerrard.
Yeah, there's a few. Obviously you've touched on Prutts, Rob Edwards. Another one which I think will Miron Muslic at Plymouth. He's an interesting one because he signed a 3.5-year deal in January. He did a phenomenal job just to even give Plymouth a chance. I mean, it was mathematically impossible really going into the final day, but the fact that they could have finished the season level on points with the team that stayed up was mind-blowing given where they were. They obviously beat Liverpool in that one-off cup game. It sounds like he's going to be leaving Home Park, so he's another name that will be a lot of clubs in the Championship will be looking at, QPR possibly. Where are you at, Fletch? With if we're talking as if Ruben has already gone, there's been no confirmation, and as I understand it, the owner and Martin Hodge, who is the new head of recruitment, working under Jared Dublin, the sporting director, a football review is taking place of everybody's performance, including the manager. So that is, some would say that's good practice to kind of look at where let's assess things that have happened over the last 12 months. What's gone well, what hasn't, what can we improve, what needs improving. Fletch, where are you at with it?
Well, if there's a review going on, I'd give them one stat to sort of chew over, which I think would blow people's minds a little bit under Ruben Selles, and it's this. Where out of the 24 teams do you think Hull City are for goals conceded in terms of being the best in the league? Under Selles?
I would say upper mid-table.
They've got the 4th best defensive record in the league since Ruben Selles came in. The only teams that have got better are Sheffield United, Leeds and Burnley. They've conceded 27 goals. So there's been talk about certain individuals in the defence in this season getting a lot of criticism. The criticism for me is that you need more goals in this side.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a good defensive base and a midfield that needs to create more, an attack needs to create more, I think Sayers needs to be given the tools to be able to say, even though, yes, he's brought in a couple in January, I think the spending needs to go towards the front line, and it should be up to Ruben Sayers, having accomplished what City have done defensively to keep themselves in games, not get hammered atop. The most conceded one game was 3 against Leeds, and they still came away with a draw. They were brilliant away against the top 6. Why rip that up now? And the difference is, under Liam, he was bankrolled and they missed out on the playoffs. So in hindsight, at the time, it was probably wise maybe to get rid of him, or the correct decision to get rid of him if the achievement was to get into the playoffs. It's the only time I'm going to mention him, by the way. Under Sayers, there's a base there to improve. And I think going into this next season, the expectation on the football club is so different, where you've probably got a 2-year stepping process at least if you want to get into the playoff places. So for me, you give Ruben Sayers the opportunity to actually try and put some more attacking impetus into this side. Now, whether or not that means loosening that defensive, protection a little bit and going forward, and then assess from there. And that's how I would have approached Liam 12 months ago. I think because they failed, you should have given him at least 6 months or up to Christmas to showcase what you can do with an expectation that everyone agrees on. And he was never given that chance. The club at the minute are in danger of becoming the new Watford, where we're just getting rid of managers before they've really had that opportunity to embed themselves. And you don't run a business like that if you're treating football like a business. No walk of life changes their CEO, the person at the top, on numerous rotation unless something is, for me, wrong. So for me, you've got to give Sayers that opportunity, at least another 6 months, to just show what they can do in an attacking sense. Because fundamentally, that's what Adjan wants. Adjan wants attacking, flowing football. He should be given that opportunity. He's done his job, kept them in the division. That was what was needed. Now they need to see what they can do in an attacking sense to get them further up the table. Because since Sayers came in, if you base the league table on when he was first appointed, City would have finished 14th, which for me is a very, very good finish with what he had at the time, with injuries, and really, let's be honest, the lack of attacking threat.
Prutts, in terms of, because I know you've got to go off and do your telly thing in a minute. What are managers thinking of City? Because like Fletch touches on there about the new Watford. Well, I think if Ruben was to go, I think City would have had 4 managers since Tom Cleverley was appointed at Watford. So they've almost, they've almost out Watforded Watford. But what would be the feeling amongst managers? You have the contact with loads of them. They come on the sofa and stuff like that. The feeling of City that at this stage of having finished 7th under Liam, and Liam has gone, and credit to him, he's doing a phenomenal job at Strasbourg, beat PSG the other night. Then you brought in Tim Volter, they've gone German, that didn't work. Then everybody, I think, was kind of like, yeah, Ruben's a really good appointment. He was doing a very good job at Reading in incredibly difficult circumstances. He's come in and he's however he's done it. He's kept City up. Now they've changed. Now, if they do change again, what would be the perception amongst managers, do you think?
I still believe that Hull City is a deemed to be a good job for managers. I do. I understand the analogy, outside the comparison with Watford, but Watford's has been going on like that for years and years and years now, hasn't it? I think the great surprise with that is the fact that Tom has lasted the season, but that sense, and I mean that with great respect to Tom, but it always felt like there were a couple of dodgy results from him being in real jeopardy. Whereas with City, if you look at how the last year's gone out, and I'm a bit like Fletch here. Obviously, you don't want to keep harking back to Liam's tenure, but the change was made. It's a shock, but then it stops being a shock because you put it into context of what football is, and then Tim comes in with his very forceful way of trying to get a team together. Statements about not necessarily taking much notice of the Championship and eyes on the Champions League. That's the football they want. Just stuff like that, which immediately the cynic in you is going, that doesn't sound quite right, does it? A man with no experience of what this level of football is talking about it almost kind of dismissively. That then, without any hint of being or taking any glee from anyone who said, in a kind of I told you so territory, that ends up badly. So he moves on. Ruben, as you say, we spoke about, and again, we mentioned Alex Neil last week. He nearly took Millwall into the playoffs. And it wasn't a case of and there's no politicking from me at all. I'm not, because I know these men, I'm not saying, I know Rob, I know Tony, I know Alex really well. I've come across Ruben. I've seen good work that he's done. So my take on it really is when it comes to discussing managers, and again, I mean this, absolutely respecting the position and the education that goes into it, the time that's got an effort that goes into building a career, whether it's a long one so far like Tony's, whether it's one that's still coaching in its infancy, you feel, with younger coaches like a Rob Edwards or Ruben, people like that. I mean, Russell Martin, another one a name that could be chucked into there. They've all got strengths and weaknesses, strengths and things to work on. They've all got their own philosophies. But there's only a finite number of jobs, and Hull City would be one of those very, very good jobs in the Championship. And I'm not saying that because we're on a Hull City podcast, but what the club has achieved in the past, i.e. being in the Premier League, what the club can create from an atmospheric point of view. There's still that big debate about what comes first, the atmosphere at the MKM or the performances at the MKM. We're still, I think, we've got foot in both camps, haven't we, where they both feed each other. But I don't think, from what I would discuss with managers and what I've heard with managers, they're not looking at Hull City going, no, count me out of that one at all. Because there's been some very, very good managers that have gone in for that job over the past couple of seasons that haven't quite come to fruition for whatever reason. And the appointments, you've got to say, have broadly been like you say, Ruben's job was to keep him up, kept him up. Was Liam's to get them promoted? Possibly. I still think that was a bit fanciful, given the teams that we're coming up against and the kind of level of squad that we were talking about. So we're looking at a manager that got fired for not achieving something, and we're looking potentially at a manager staying in position possibly after this review, with his achievement being staying in the division that the other one was tasked with getting out of. So it doesn't make any I'm not making any sense here because it doesn't make any sense to me. So if Ruben stays great, yes, bit of foundation, work through the summer, give him the players that are needed. If he doesn't, you've got to make sure that it's not a Tim Walter appointment and you spend a couple of months arsing around with not getting the right players in, then chasing your tail, then have to make an appointment to get you out the mire again, which I'm sure City fans would be tired of seeing that.
Go on, Fletch.
Just to say on the back, I think the yardstick really now is because Ruben Selles has got them up, it really does now categorise Adrian into does he think that the football has been attractive enough? Because that's what he got rid of Liam for. And I think if it becomes the same reasoning for getting rid of Ruben, which I think is plausible because I don't think Ruben's football in comparison to the two other previous managers, Ruben's football has been productive and generated points, but I think the hierarchy might look at it and go that it was a bit possibly long-winded or not as entertaining, which fundamentally I think is what Adrian wants and the rest of the hierarchy want. But I don't think, again, you run a football club in that it's a results business at the end of the day. Go on, Baz, and then I'll chuck some fan comments in.
Yeah, I think that you have to admit that there have been games at times this season, like there was last season, where, particularly at home, where you think, every time they've had a brilliant Sheffield United away, they were brilliant, fantastic. Kick on, lose to Stoke. Go to Sunderland, win, fantastic. Go to Cardiff and build on it, they lose. And then, you have the Plymouth, the wins over Plymouth, the wins over Oxford. Then you get the Luton. They've been really poor. I think we've all said this, and they have been really poor since the international break. Whatever's changed as a collective, they came back against Luton, were really poor. They weren't great, and they've stumbled over the line because Luton got thumped on the final day. They've not gone out and secured safety off their own back, and they've had numerous chances to do it. The Derby game was, and I still maintain, I thought they played for long periods of that game. I thought they played quite well against Derby without really looking like scoring, but they obviously fell off a cliff once that goal went in. But what I do know is this isn't just going to be. The Liam sacking was solely down to the owner. That was his decision. He decided over a period of time, which I think he had doubt from January. I think we said that last year. And it sort of came to a crescendo in the final weeks. And ultimately, he decided to make that change. But that was all on him. This isn't all on him. This is a decision that is being made with Jared Dublin, sporting director, Martin Hodge, who is relatively new. If you don't know about him, former Sheffield Wednesday goalkeeper. He's had jobs at Swansea and various other football clubs. He's been, although it's not been officially confirmed, he's been working as head of recruitment for the last few weeks. He's heavily involved in that decision as well. So it isn't, I know we're talking as if it's inevitable, but if Ruben does go, this isn't just Adrian deciding he's gone. I think it will be more of a collective. Ultimately, he carries the can. He's the owner and he has the final say. But I think this time around, there are more people feeding into him than perhaps there were last time. Go on, Fletch.
Well, I'll throw it now to KB. We haven't heard from KB in a while. But,
she's enjoying Nero. She's having
noisy.
She's got a second brew.
I hope she's got one of them cinnamon buns because cinnamon buns in Nero are banging.
Yeah, she's getting a stamps in on a card. And you can have a couple of copies.
Come on, Kathryn.
Hello. Fletch, you just wanted me to. Can you hear me?
I just want you to rant either positively or negatively.
Oh right, okay. It's kind of like we're saying. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd love us to play exciting football, but I also just want us to stay in the division. Like, at the end of the day, some teams get promoted playing boring football, don't they? Like, it just, what would you prefer? Would you rather be mid-table and watch really nice football but not win every week, or would you rather watch kind of, maybe not the best football and win more games? I'd just like us to win more games at home next season. I think that we'd all like that. It's just been I'd also quite like a quiet season, just a season of not kind of much, draw or anything like that. If we were mid-table next season, excellent. no risk of going down. No point giving us the hope of going up. Just sort of sit in mid-table all season and just coast along. And I think we could all just have a little bit of a break and, not like reduce our stress levels a little bit.
No chance. I think the other thing as well, Prutts, about the attacking football, and I know for me it's a bit of a fallacy because look, Adrian he had this dream of his team playing open, expansive football. I mean, that's not the reality of a whole city. You haven't got the money to be able to go and do that. Liam, at times, that team, I'll never forget that first half at Southampton it was astonishing, the football. But he brought Tim in on the proviso that would be the football that Tim provided. He didn't. And because of the situation that they were in, bottom of the table, Ruben was never going to come in and play open, expansive football. Well, first of all, because the situation they're in. And secondly, they didn't have the players for it. So he's very quickly looked at it and gone, well, I can't, we don't score goals. I mean, João Pedro's finished the season top scorer with 6, which tells and they are the lowest scorers with Luton scoring 3 on the final day. They are the lowest scorers in the league after 46 games. He had to tailor his approach to try and get results. And yes, Derby, there were so many games that we've just mentioned a few that they could have gone and won the game and they didn't. But ultimately, given what he had at his disposal, coupled with the situation they're in, he had to be really pragmatic, didn't he? And just try and get results and try and play off, as we said before, like at Hillsborough, try and play off a moment rather than going gung-ho, hell for leather, and before you know it, you're 2-0 down and the game's gone.
I do think even though I work in an industry now, which is obviously it's sport-based entertainment, which makes it sound terrible, but you watch football to be entertained, but you don't follow. It sounds like, but you don't follow your team to be entertained. You follow it because you love them, and it goes through thick and thin. And some days they will do things that you'll marvel at. Other days they'll do things that's just got your head in your hands. You mentioned that half against Southampton. Therein lies possibly the definition of why it's like that. You've got players that can do that for a very short space of time. If they could consistently do that, they wouldn't be playing for Hull City at the bottom end of the Championship, would they? Let's be brutally honest. To say, I mean, having never or never will be in a position to buy a football club, I can absolutely understand Ajin saying, do you know what? I quite like us to do this in a slightly different way, to be honest. Can I get over and watch and be entertained and go home? You know what I mean? And I totally get that. But it's inherently what football is. There's no guarantee with it that you put a team together and it'll play in a certain way. You want that to happen, yet you employ coaches that have been brought up and educated in different ways and have their own philosophies. And I'm not saying for 1 second that I know the finer details of Tim Bolter's managerial career, but to read it out on paper, you're looking at it going, well, there's nothing to suggest that you could do that with this group of players in this division that you don't know about. Not saying you have to be Tony Mowbray that knows about the division to get that. And I'm using Tony as an example because of his long history in English football, long career, in English football. But the style of football thing, and again, you mentioned me talking to managers, is just, I think it's a fallacy because it doesn't make any sense. And without being someone that's been in football and you almost kind of saying, well, it's not about people not understanding that haven't played the game. I totally get that. We all want to play wonderful attacking football. We all want it to be entertaining for the fans. For 95% of the football teams that take the pitch, it's about getting a result and not losing. That's what it is. So City got to the point where they were just inherently trying not to lose, weren't they? I'm not saying that doesn't mean that you're doing nothing to win the game, but as Fletcher's stats suggest, they're thinking, Christ, keep the back door shut and hopefully we'll get something going forward. Now, that's not to say that Ruben wouldn't have worked on attacking phases of play or attacking set pieces or getting the right players in to do that. It's just the want will be there. The reality, I think, is just Leeds entertain and score goals like they do because of the players that they've got. And Daniel's a good manager with the pedigree, though, of working with Emi Buendia, with the kid who scored all the goals, his name escapes me, playing up front for Norwich. Timu Puku. Yeah. Scores a bag full. He's got players right now, and we'll soon see how that develops into the Premier League, that fit between the Premier League and the Championship. Quite clearly, the best team in the Championship, the best squad in the Championship. But also, they'll have a wage bill to match. So, to categorise where City go, 14th, as Fletch says, as a City fan, going back to what Kathryn says, you're kind of going, yeah, that looking around going, that feels about right. Yeah, there's massive teams in that division with huge wage bills. There's big teams coming up. Bloody hell. Birmingham City, Wrexham, their finances are through the roof, aren't they? Slightly different with the parameters of what the Championship means for that financial regulation. But if City, like I said, you've got two big clubs coming up there that potentially are just going to come flying past Hull City, aren't they? Even though they're League One clubs last season, you would expect them to be knocking up in the top end. So there's another two clubs that have put traffic in front of Hull City, finishing at least in the top half, given the players that they've got. So it's hard to work. And again, I'm saying this purely from the point of view of playing football and working in football. The last time I had a season ticket at Nottingham Forest because I was a trainee. I had a season ticket at Hull City because I was in the School of Excellence, God knows, 30 years ago. I've never bought a season ticket. I've bought tickets here and there to football matches more often than not where they're working at them. Or if not, I know enough people that with the companies that I work for that get you a ticket or someone in the team that gets you a ticket. And I'm super fortunate for that. And I'm not saying that to sound smug at all. I'm saying it to say that because I'm not sat there going, I want to be entertained. I'm sat there watching a football match. But if I'm digging in my pocket and then being asked to go again, can you get another season ticket even before you know what division we're going? Yep, I'll do it. No worries. And people are going, oh, they're not very noisy at the MKM. Big part of me's going, do you know what? Without swearing, shove it. I've paid my money. I've done my bit. I've committed here. I'm coming on a Saturday afternoon, even when we've not won at home or we've not entertained at home. Give me my value for money. Seriously, give me my value for money. I totally get that as a fan. I just think in reality, when you're talking about philosophies, ways of play, all of that stuff, it's a wonderful thing to base managerial expectancy and careers on. But the reality is winning games. The reality is winning or as we saw at the weekend, not losing one.
Yeah, absolutely. Prutts, I know you've got to shoot because you've got to go on. Are you on with Rob?
Well, if you turn your telly on, it'll be on behind you in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can't wait. Are you on with Rob?
Loose women. Possibly, yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I look forward to that. That's always nice.
But anyway, I'll sign off by saying, like I said, I'm a cynic. I've celebrated staying up as a player. I've absolutely celebrated staying up as a player. And I didn't give a flying what anyone else thought, because I saw the look on the fans' faces of, you lot have been crap for quite a while. Today, can you sort it out? Yeah, all right, that's a fair trade. Shake hands, move on, celebrate, great. So City fans, celebrate it. The players should celebrate it, obviously. Celebrate it by being disciplined. And I think we hopefully have some form of positivity going into the off-season and coming out into pre-season. But, I mean, famous last words, we might be sat here discussing the fact that the club's been sold, there's a new manager, there's 27 different players, and they're now playing football at Craven Park.
Oh, don't tell him that. And on that bombshell, he's going to go.
Sorry. Well, it's been a pleasure, you three. It's always a pleasure to chat.
See you again soon.
Enjoy your summer. Enjoy wearing your leathers.
Go on.
I didn't need that image.
Go on, the Tigers. Love you lots. Bye.
Those Tigers. Yeah, it's.
I also need to go and get my train just so I don't miss it. So
what a shocking
excuse. I thought I'd just. I know, so sorry. I thought I would let Prutts do his more dramatic exit, and then I would just kind of sneak off
away
into the background of London Euston Station.
Always a pleasure, Kathryn.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
We'll see Kathryn again soon. She's off to the Manchester United Media Day for the Women's FA Cup final. So it's just me and you, Fletch, and now we've got rid of those two.
Well, you say we've got rid of those two. Them two are off to high class working positions, aren't they? And you're stuck with me. You know, what have you done in a past life to be stuck with this scutterbug?
Look, it's one of those, isn't it, with Ruben, that I think because I think what's important here is there was a big connection between Liam and the supporters. Yeah. Obviously, because he played for the football club with distinction, he won promotion, and also how he was as a human being, which trumps everything else. And he was a fantastic human being. He not only did he get the football club, you know, we know his nan was from Hull, and all that, but he would, if there were fans queuing for shirts or queuing for tickets, he would go and meet them. He would spend time to talk to them. And he genuinely cared about the football club. So there was a connection with the manager and the fans. When Tim came, he was very abrasive. He never made any effort to build relationships with some staff, with the fans, with some players. And there was never a connection built with Walter. And so when it turned very quickly in terms of when results were poor and everything else, he'd not built up any credit in the bank. The fact that actually the situation he inherited was difficult, the squad he inherited was threadbare, the recruitment was all over the shop. Some of it was very good, some of it not so good, and it was all done very late. All those mitigating factors that were in his favour, nobody gave a monkeys because of how he was, and he turned on the fans, obviously, funny enough, against Portsmouth, and said he was critical. So there was never a connection built with Ruben. Ruben, he can be quite standoffish at times. He's very intense. He keeps himself to himself. But there has been a connection built with the fans over time. The fans have sung his name from very early on. And we saw those fantastic scenes at full time at Fratton when he was celebrating with the fan. You could see how much it meant to him. And, he's talking to his little boy on the pitch on his phone. And, he's put an awful lot into it. So if Ruben is to go, there is going to be that separation of separation anxiety again between the supporters, because they have built up, there's not been a lot of love for the team at times, and a lot of fans have said, there's not a lot to like about the team. We've not really built a connection with the team, despite moments at Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday and Sunderland, etc. But with the manager, hasn't there? There has been something built with the manager. So if he does go, fans are going to feel that.
Yeah, I take your point on that. I think the one thing I would maybe add to that is I mentioned it previously, and that's when it comes to his post-match. You've mentioned there that he's quite intense. I think sometimes it's not a bad thing to, just the phrase I'm looking for. I find him sometimes when it comes to pre and post-match, it's usually the same narrative of what he's saying. It's very, very precise. Talking about parts in the game, moments in the game, that kind of thing. But sometimes you just, as a journalist, you want them to give you a line. I don't think Ruben really ever gives a line. I think he's very, very focused and intense, as you say, it is a good thing. It is a good thing, and but it doesn't really give much for the fans to attach to, I think. But the stuff you say there about obviously celebrating with his young lad on the phone on the pitch and going over to the fans at the end, it was that final sort of unbottling for me of real emotion from Ruben, because I think he's been very level-headed throughout the season. I'll bring some of the comment fans in, because some of these we've boxed off already, and then I'm going to throw a question to you, Baz, off the back. The Amber Wire asks, if the rumours are true regarding Selles' departure, why is Tony Mowbray a name that's been touted? Adrian wants attacking football. That person doesn't think that Mowbray fits the bill. Gazareld is asking about Martin Hodge. What does he bring? What can we expect? What do we think of his future, which we've harped on for a while? JP asks, is there a decent transfer budget for whoever's the manager next season? That's another talking point. Peter Chapman asks, who should be captain next year? Do you stick or twist regarding Louis? We can't really go too much into it because of what you've said at the start, Baz. Ben asks, do you think Adrian will learn lessons from his time of his ownership and the current turmoil at Fenerbahce? He's made a few mistakes, needs to learn from them. Can you see him taking more of a backseat and leaving the football to the people that he employs? And the Black and Amber, probably the most emotive one of the comments is, it was an open letter to Adrian Ilagella. Please don't remove Ruben from his position. The fans would like to see some stability. The Black and Amber says, you messed up in the summer. This is why we finished 21st. Learn and move on. Keep sales and attract some decent players. The thing I worry about, Baz, looking at the previous managers that Hull City have had, at the back end of Ehab Alam and the Alams ownership, from Steve Bruce on, you had Mike Phelan, who was his number 2, who took the reins after a dreadful summer in 2016-17. Then they went for Marco Silva. My view is if Marco Silva had been at the start of that season, Hull City would have been a completely different football club to now. They would have had players like Richarlison up front because he ended up going to Watford under Marco. They then went for Leonid Slutsky, which is similar to Tim Volta. A lot of attacking football, didn't work. They then went for someone in Nigel Adkins who average is mean, but Nigel Adkins' Championship and Football League record is it doesn't shoot out over other managers, if you like. Then they went with Grant McCann, untested at the level. That season was a disaster after losing Bowen and Grzycki. Didn't change tactically. My question is, if Ruben Selles goes, looking at the record of having Rossignol, Volta, Selles, are we in danger as a football club of diluting the, I guess, ability of the manager coming in? Because we've mentioned it right at the beginning about Dean Smith, Gary O'Neill, Stephen Gerrard, Rob Edwards, all good end managers, either in the Premier League or Championship. Are the club in danger of diluting what's available to them if they get rid of Sayers? Because I think those managers would look in and go, it's not for me, this, if it's only going to be, let's say, 6 months if the ownership and the hierarchy aren't happy straight away.
Possibly, but managers are very single-minded, aren't they? And the managers will always want jobs, and they'll always want to go to football clubs. And Hull City, as Prutts touched on earlier on, it is a basket case of that. There is no doubt. But they'll also see it as an opportunity that actually the playing squad going into the summer is in a good place. If they get Miller and Bellumi back at a decent point in pre-season, Matazo's hopefully not too long after that. You know, the squad you've got some very, very good players in that squad. As tough as it's been, you know, John Egan was a fantastic arrival. Charlie Hughes, you know, they've got there's a nucleus of a good bunch of players. It does need a fair amount of work to turn it around. But I still think managers will look at the job and go, "There's an opportunity there," you know. And also, there's an owner there that will back the football club. You know, financially, Prutts, I'm not sure if it was you or Prutts raised it, but you know, they are going to have to cut the cloth accordingly this summer. They've got a lot of outstanding transfer payments that are going to be due, which is going to impact them. They spent a lot of money last summer. You know, if you think of three players in particular, Charlie Hughes, Bellumi, and Miller, you know, that's the best part of £15 million there. They also spent, and this blows my mind here, but they also spent almost £5 million on Mason Burstow and Carl Joseph, who have scored 2 goals in about 38 appearances between them. And Burstow scored 2 goals, one against Swansea and one away at Middlesbrough. I got those the wrong way around. Borough came first and then Swansea. But they have got some players there. It does need some work. So I still think there'll be managers out of there, if Ruben does go, that will think there's an opportunity. And if I can get that team with a full pre-season and some clever recruitment in the top half of the pitch, yes, there's decisions to be made, and we'll cover them next time on the pod. Ryan Giles, you know, if Ruben goes, does Ryan Giles have a future at the football club suddenly? Because they've got a £4 million asset there that they've got to do something with. But that's another conversation for another day. There's loads of other players, Mail and Rachopi, that are going to be coming back, and decisions have got to be made about their respective futures. But in answer to your question, Fletch, yeah, I think there will be a lot of managers. I mean, another one to throw in the mix is Ryan Mason. You know, he's very highly regarded, obviously ex-City, big connection to the football club, currently on Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff. But there seems to be a feeling that Ryan Mason will leave Spurs this summer in search of a number one job himself. I mentioned Muslik earlier on. You know, is the chatter about Muslik, is it genuine in the terms of is he a good manager, or is it just that he had a lucky stint at Plymouth and it went relatively well given their situation? I know he didn't keep them up, but you know, is it just noise? Is he the flavour of the month type of thing? So I think there's a lot to go into it. But this is still an attractive job because it's Hull City, as Prutts says, you know, recently out of the Premier, still relative. It's not immediately recently, but within the last decade, out of the Premier League. Fantastic stadium, training ground needs some work, but has been done up. And you know, it's not great, but it's okay. But there's an ownership there that want to improve. That what you know, it's not you're going into Sheffield Wednesday and you've got Chansiri who is a complete and utter mentalist. The fans hate him. You know, there's all sorts of issues, financials, and this, that, and the other. While City isn't completely stable and far from it, I still think managers will look at it and go, "There's an opportunity there."
So, of the attacking options, the one that I think is most curious to me because of, as you say, Bellumi and Miller coming back and they'll be first choices. I'm really intrigued to see what Abu Kamara can offer over a full season because under Sayers, he scored 5 goals in practically half a season. So, I mean, double that up if you keep him fit. there's at least there's some depth in that wide possession behind either Miller or Bellumi. Hully's Massive asks, what are the chances of keeping Joe Geldhart in terms of either via another loan or financially do they even go in for him on a permanent?
I think the permanent's out of the question. The figures that I was quoted, the figures I was given that Leeds were quoting would make it impossible, and frankly, you wouldn't pay it. Joe's, I think he's been brilliant, but you can, with respect to Joe, you can see why he wasn't getting in the Leeds team, because some of the chances, you look at the two chances he carved out for himself brilliantly at Portsmouth in each half, where he's picked the ball up from deep, he's taken 3 or 4 plays on, he's got into the box, and he's created himself a shooting opportunity, but he's not scored. He's gone straight at the goalkeeper. I think if he was going to be that, if he needs to get to that level, you've got to be taking one of those. So I don't think the prices that Leeds are quoting are realistic. Whether that changes now they've got promoted, I don't know. I think there's a willing. Joe would unequivocally love to come back. I think City, irrespective of manager, would love to have him back. Obviously, if there is a managerial change, does the new manager want Geldhart? That's the other question. Does he might not think that Geldhart is the player for him. But I think if all stars aligned, they would look to try and get him back. But it would be another loan, and then obviously Leeds are out. He's out of contract. I think next summer at Leeds. I think it's 2026. Don't quote me on that. But which is Leeds would then lose him for. Is he under? I'm not sure. I can't remember the tribunal situation. But anyway, they're not going to get what they want for him. I can't imagine that. What I would say is his form at City would have alerted a host of other clubs that were perhaps eyeing him but weren't sure. We're like, we think he's got talent, but his record at Leeds hasn't been great. He's had a couple of loan spells that haven't gone massively well. We're a bit like Liam Delap. We'll let somebody else test the water with him, and then if it works, then when we see a bit more of him, we've got a bit more of a back catalogue of work to go at. Then we can opt for him. So I think because of what he's done at City, he scored 5 goals. He's looked bright. He's importantly stayed fit. He's played in every game. He's not got injured, which can be a problem when you've not played for a long period of time. So I think there'll be other clubs looking at Joe and going, there's an opportunity there with him if we can get him in, and not necessarily he's going to play every week, but so I don't know. But I think there's definitely a will there for City to try and get him back. As I say, the caveat to that question is, or that answer is what happens with the manager, because that manager might not want him, basically. Are you still there? Oh, Fletch, what have you done? Apologies if you're listening on audio. Fletch is frozen, and it looks like he's looking at the telly ahead of him. Are you back, Fletch? Oh, he's gone. And he's back. Oh, you're back.
What's going on here then?
I don't know. The gremlins of, but you're back. That's all that matters.
I'm backstage, Baz, according to my phone, but we'll press on.
You're there. Crack on as if you're there. Everything mind is fine.
Let's pretend. Jamie Kelwick asks, are there any real positives we can take away from the season? Because for him, Eva Pandor proved himself to be one of the best keepers in the Championship. Charlie Hughes was the best new signing, and the fans were brilliant both home and away this season. So what is the biggest positive? Do you know what? In fact, I'm going to throw someone else's question here because I think I know what your answer is going to be. I need to find it. It's from Harry Bullamont, who simply asks, what was the best scran you had this season?
Funny enough, I've done like an alternative. I started writing it after Sheffield Wednesday because I was so wrapped up in the moment that Charlie gave us at Hillsborough. I started doing a piece of my kind of favourite moments of the season. When I threw it up on Tuesday morning, I finished it. Now they're safe. And I put a line in. So forgive me for those that just humour us about the food. I went City because Henry does phenomenal, and his team at the MKM do phenomenal food, and Kareem at the training ground. I'll drop this little anecdote in. We'd all finished all the press and stuff on Thursday before the Pompey game and getting ready to leave. And then everybody else had gone. And this plate of food appeared with a knife and fork, and it was Kareem had plated me up a flavoured chicken in a sauce, some crispy potatoes and some broccoli. Oh my God, it was astonishingly good. Yeah, I've got to get City, but special mentions to Swansea, who were great. Norwich are good, and Middlesbrough as well. The overall standard of Pressfood this year has gone down massively. But in terms of positives, Fletch, I think the overriding positive is that they've stayed in the league. I think, given, and we were firing warning shots way back in the summer about City, about, I think back to the Reading game in pre-season against Ruben's Reading. They didn't like scoring, and we said then, where are the goals coming from? That's been the theme all season. They finished as lowest goal scorers. So I think that is, given what we could all see coming in September, October, November. The fact they've stayed in the league is the most important thing. That is the positive. Within that, I think Charlie Hughes, he's played 27 times, I think, in the Championship. He's been very, very good. Him and Egan have been exceptional in the last few weeks. So I think Charlie's been brilliant. The goalkeeper, it's not all been plain sailing. I thought the goal he conceded at Portsmouth was awful. He should never have allowed Christian Sadie to score from that angle. But you think back to the QPR game at Loftus Road, they could have been 3 or 4 down in that first 10 minutes, but for Ivor, he kept them in it and they went and won the game. So I think he's had some difficult moments in the season, both on the pitch and obviously with Rushworth and all that scenario. And also the noise around the summer about him coming in and not being fancied by Liam and being out the squad, and Ryan Allsop being given the shirt and all that. So I he's been here since last January. I think he's had a difficult period as Evil, but I think he's been very good in his first season in the Championship. I don't think there are a huge amount of positives. I think Sean McLaughlin, the way he's adapted to life, playing at left back, I think he's played 37 times, I think, which is the most in any season in his City career. So being asked to play at left back. So I think there've been some minor positives. The overriding thing is they're still in the Championship, and we're having these conversations in the Championship. Unfortunately, it looks like Fletch is gone as I answer that question. So I've been left to my own devices. Prutts has gone off to do telly. Kathryn at Euston has gone off to do Manchester United Media Day, and Fletch is just, well, if you're watching the YouTube video, you'll see that Fletch is the ball of doom. And yeah, so I'm going to call it quits. I've got to go off and interview Charlie Hughes now, so I'm going to go interview Charlie, and that we're going to call it quits for today. So look, at least they're safe. Lots of water to pass under the bridge between now and between now and pre-season, but obviously lots of things to be decided about the manager. Who, if the manager is to go, who is the manager that comes in? A few discussion points on contracts. Not too many. There are only 5 players out of contract this summer, and a couple of those: Brandon Fleming, Callum Jones, Doken Sinek, Amrabat, and of course João Pedro. They're the 5 that are out of contract. So there's not a huge amount of discussion around those really. Big discussion about the players that are coming back. The likes of Giles, Marvin Malem. I know that Paderborn have the option to make that permanent. There are other players coming back. Richopi is one. Xavier Simons coming back from Wickham. There are others. What do they do with Zambrano is another topic. Obviously, Gelhardt, do they try and get him? There's so many recruitment questions that we'll cover on the next episode of the 1904 Club. But the final message is thank you so much for watching, listening, all your feedback throughout the summer. We do appreciate everything, and we know we do read every comment that comes in. And without you listening and watching, we would have no podcast. So thank you so much for all your support throughout the season. It really is appreciated. We will keep this going through the summer, just as we did last summer, because it feels like there's going to be little rest for us. There's going to be no kind of downtime to kind of take stock of what's been a frantic and relentless season. But alas, that is Hull City. So that's it from me. And thanks to Fletch and thanks to Prutts and Kathryn and also Bernsey as well, and our guests throughout the season. This isn't the end, of course, but it's kind of the end of the season. So we are wrapping it up as the end of the season podcast. But you know as well as I do that Hull City never sleeps. There's plenty to get our teeth into, and we will see what happens in the coming days and weeks. And that's it from the latest episode. Take it steady, up the Tigers.